our second webinar of this week, but our first webinar with our subject matter experts webinar that we have each week. Welcome, thank you for being here and on time. I know a couple people will still be logging in and joining us. We are recording this, just a reminder. We will be posting that on Blackboard at the conclusion of this webinar. And you can go back and watch it as many times as you would like to get the information that you need. Just a reminder, as we're going through tonight, you can ask your questions live, or you can type them in the chat. I'll be monitoring them. Sandra also helps me as well. And we usually don't have any issue with hitting every question, but if for some reason we run out of time, we will get those questions answered and post them in Blackboard after the fact. So before we actually get started, I've got a couple of people, actually one person to introduce you to, and then she will introduce our speaker, and that's our director, Misty Fox. She is the Director of Entrepreneurship and Small Business here at the IVMF. She leads all the programs that we have for entrepreneurship, and she joins us at the beginning of each class just to welcome everyone. So I'm just going to send it over to you, Misty, just so you can say hello and welcome everyone to the class.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I appreciate it so much. I see a couple people that are familiar faces, including some of our own IVMF team. Santa mentioned Misty Fox. Welcome to Cohort 3 of the EBV-SPARK. Number 3 is my lucky number, so I have a feeling that this will be an amazing cohort as well. We really appreciate you all joining us. And I just want to say, and you'll hear Deanna say it throughout, you'll hear Sandra say it throughout, that this is really just the beginning of, hopefully a long relationship with the IVMF. Get to know us more. We hope to get to know you more, because there are a million resources that we've built, not only in the small business portfolio, but in many other portfolios that we hope to connect with you on as you continue throughout your careers, or have friends and families continue throughout their careers. So with that, I get to introduce Dr. Michael Haynie, who needs no introduction to most, but for you all, he is the Vice Chancellor here at Syracuse University. He's an educator, started the career here at SU in Whitman as an entrepreneurship professor, and importantly, he is an Air Force veteran. So I know that this is meant to be very, very conversational, so I hope you've brought a lot of questions, and I know that he will be very happy to answer them all. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Haynie.
Thank you, Misty. I appreciate the very brief introduction. Those are the kinds I like. Welcome to everybody. I do wish, we had the opportunity to welcome you all in person. Before COVID, we would run these programs in person on our campus at Syracuse University or in different parts of the country. We've had to, like so many others, have to make the transition to a virtual environment. So we're all becoming experts at Zoom. But thanks for coming out. This will be, I'll tell you in advance, this will be the best thing I do all day. My passion is entrepreneurship. It's what I teach. It's what I study. And on top of that, you all represent the intersection of my two lives. As Misty said, I'm a former Air Force officer. I had the good fortune of having the Air Force keep sending me off to school while I was on active duty, to include sending me off to the University of Colorado at Boulder to pursue my PhD in entrepreneurship and business strategy, and taught at the Air Force Academy for a bunch of years. And that's where I fell in love with teaching and decided to get out in 2006 and go to Syracuse as an entrepreneurship professor. So I've been involved with teaching and training veterans business ownership for now going on 15 years. And I don't get to do it as much today as I have in the past, since I took an administrative role at Syracuse as the Vice Chancellor. So all of that is the explanation as to why this will be the best thing I do all day. So I appreciate the opportunity that you all are giving me to spend a little time talking about business ownership with you. What Misty and Deanna, really asked me to focus on was this idea of opportunity recognition. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking. I'd rather spend time having a conversation with you, answering questions, but I will take a couple minutes just to sort of set up the topic that I think is uniquely relevant to this group. I noticed reading through your bios, many of you have businesses or growing businesses now. One of the things that is true in the context of talking about how it is that people see and act on opportunities in the environment to launch and grow businesses is that too often people think about opportunity recognition as the first step in some longer business ownership journey. But truth be told, if you want to grow and scale and sustain a viable business over time, opportunity recognition is something that you need to focus on every day, because the extent to which you're constantly looking for new opportunities in the environment to enter new markets, bring on new customers, enhance the value proposition of your offering, whether it's a product or a service, it really becomes a way of thinking about business ownership. And again, that's sort of what I study. I study how entrepreneurs think and see opportunities in the environment that other people don't see. And in that regard, I've been interviewing successful entrepreneurs, for, it makes me sound old, but now the better part of going on 20 years. And, one of the things I always ask successful entrepreneurs is, what is it that they're doing? What is the act of entrepreneuring, if you will? And, from what is now thousands of answers to that question, there are a couple things that I can pull out and I want to share with you as the basis for then a conversation and really just answering questions that you guys might have that I think are important. One of those things, if you will, is the opportunity to be different. And I want to spend a moment just explaining what that is. The extent to which you create value for the consumer that you serve. And again, it doesn't matter what the product, service is, et cetera. People are willing to pay as a function of the value you create. The more value you create, the more they are willing to pay. But what that gets to is that if you think about how businesses compete, in the most fundamental way, there's two competitive strategies that businesses pursue. One is a competitive strategy based on price. And that this is the quintessential example here is Walmart, right? The idea that you're competing based on price, and as a consequence, based on price, you have to sell large volumes to generate a significant return. More often, and especially newer businesses, young entrepreneurs, and I don't mean young in age, I mean young in the context of, businesses less than 10 years old, the most effective strategy that they can pursue to compete and generate the kind of returns that you can plow back into the business and help grow it is to compete based on differentiation. To compete as a function of delivering a product or a service to the consumer that fundamentally solves a problem for that consumer in a way that is above and beyond the other options that the consumer has to solve that problem. Excuse my phone ringing. You think by all this Zoom by now, I would have learned to mute my phone. One of my favorite examples here, and it's the folks on the Zoom from my team who have heard me talk about this before are sick of me talking about Starbucks, but Starbucks is a great example of what I'm talking about. If you think about the evolution of Starbucks, to this day, Starbucks competes based on a differentiated strategy. So what at its core, what's their product? The product is coffee, right? But a most days I stop at the Starbucks right that's close to my office, and I pay $2.78 for a large coffee, right? I could, 4 storefronts down, there's a Dunkin' Donuts where I could get the exact same amount of coffee, for $1.70. But for some reason, I'm paying $2.78 every morning for a cup of coffee. Why is that? What is it that Starbucks is the coffee that much better, or am I arguably just a sucker? At the end of the day, Starbucks has worked over years to create a differentiated value proposition. When Starbucks was first founded, they didn't even sell coffee. Matter of fact, Howard Schultz, the guy that everybody thinks, is the founder of Starbucks, did not found Starbucks. It was 2 other guys out in Seattle who started a little business selling coffee beans. And Howard Schultz was an appliance salesman who couldn't figure out why these 2 guys at this store in Seattle were ordering so many coffee grinders. So he got on a plane from New York City, flew out to Seattle to see what was going on. And he found these 2 guys that have created this coffee culture in Seattle and were selling beans for folks to take home and grind and make coffee at home. And he asked them the question, why aren't you selling coffee? Why can't someone come in the store and buy a cup of coffee? And they said, well, that's not what we're interested in. We just want to sell. And he badgered these guys for years until they agreed to sell him the original Starbucks. And the first thing he did was start serving coffee. But what's important is what comes next. If you think about the evolution of that business, it has been a constant effort to differentiate that product from Dunkin' Donuts. It was selling coffee, and then it was selling a wide variety, all the foofy drinks, the lattes and the mocha stuff, and then they added food, right? And then they added other beverages, and then they added kitchen equipment, and then they went to music, and but the point of all of this is all of this ongoing evolution of the product and service offering has been 100% about differentiating their value proposition so that they can charge a premium price, so that they can convince a consumer that somehow when you go in and then walk out of the store, a Starbucks store, that what you have in your hand is somehow differentiated from all of those other options, if you will, to put coffee in your hand in the morning. And the point of all of this is back to opportunity recognition. All of you, and again, I know only top line summary of what you provided about your business that Misty and Deanna provided to me, but there's not a single example of a business in there where I would argue that there's any other competitive strategy that you should pursue other than a differentiated one. And I will likely hear I have a tax business. How am I going to differentiate a tax business? Guess what? A million different ways. It could be differentiated as a function of service delivery. It could be differentiated as a function of how you engage with your customer. A great, more relevant example here is Zappos. Anybody shop, by show of hands, anybody shop at Zappos online? So when Zappos started, all they did was sell shoes, right? And guess what? There wasn't a single pair of shoes that you could buy at Zappos that you couldn't buy in a brick and mortar store. But how did they differentiate their offering? What did Zappos do? They created a model that had nothing to do with the product they sold, but it was the experience of buying from Zappos. So you could order, and their model was the next day, the shoes that you ordered, and this is at their founding, the next day, the shoes you ordered, because at the time, all they did was sell shoes. They didn't sell anything else. The shoes would be on your doorstep the next day. And then if you didn't like them, you could put them right back in the box they came with, and they would instantly go back the next morning, and you wouldn't be charged. That's how they differentiated from everybody else that was trying to sell shoes online. and it's what made the difference for them over time. And again, like Starbucks, you look at their business model, everything that they've done since is a constant effort, a relentless focus on trying to continue to differentiate what they do. A different way to say it is avoid slipping into the abyss of having to compete on price. Because if you have to compete on price, you're competing for nickels and dimes. And at the end of the day, the extent to which you're going to generate enough return to grow your business, it just won't be there. Competing on price is an ugly place to be, especially anywhere in the first 5 years of your business. So, part of my message here for all of you is to think hard about, this idea of opportunity recognition in the context of how do I continue to focus on differentiating my offering from others. So maybe I'll pause there for a second, and Misty, I don't know how, or Deanna, I don't know how you want to do this.
Sure. So I actually have some.
Oh, there you go. How about that?
I am.
Surprise.
So actually, we've got our first question in from the group. So I'll start there, and then I can continue with some other questions too.
Sure.
On track. The question is, what ways you were talking about, differentiators. So what ways can NAMD, if you want to unmute and kind of clarify the question, because you kind of abbreviated a little bit, that would be great. But what ways can different like value propositions get protected? Is that what you're asking?
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, Doctor. So yeah, that's what it seems like. What Starbucks and I read the Harvard business case about this too. But coming from somebody who's trying to start here, and I was just trying to prioritize my time rather than having the business started. Should I just work on the patents, the legality to protect it first, and then starting creating the how to generate and monetize it?
Yeah. So I will tell you, and this, my answer to that is I have a bias, but I've been doing this long enough to, I think, maybe have earned my bias over time. I am not a big proponent of spending a lot of time or a lot of money on patent protection, copyright protection, because at the end of the day, the extent to which, one, you can't patent an idea. There's no way to legally protect an idea. You can patent a design. You can patent a process or a procedure. All that said, it is it is so easy to engineer around a patent, to modify a process just enough so that patent protection doesn't extend to your competitor. My personal view is the best way to protect a novel idea or intellectual property is to get the business off the ground, and it is the first mover advantage, right? And if you think a lot about a lot of businesses in the context of names, that in retrospect, you look at what they're doing and say, that's intuitive. I should have thought of that. At the end of the day, what's protecting their competitive advantage is simply the fact that they got to market first, and they started building a customer base. They started building a brand. They started building a reputation. That might not be the answer that you want to hear, because I think there is this closely held view sometimes that I have to do everything I can to legally protect. Unless you're talking about some very novel technology, but if it is a 9 times out of 10, if it's a consumer-focused product or a process related to a service, et cetera, you would be surprised how little protection that you're going to get from a patent. So, again, top level, not knowing a ton of details about the business, what you're looking to patent. I'm a big believer in rolling up the sleeves and getting the business off the ground, start generating customers, start generating revenue.
Thank you so much for answering that, Dr. Haynie. To kind of keep us on the kind of discussion topics that we are having in Blackboard, I just want to kind of get your opinion on, we've been discussing, why we think that veterans have a higher success rate, or military connected have a higher success rate in running a business, starting a business. What is your opinion on that? Is it something veterans learn in the military? Is it something about the type of people who decide to join the military? A lot of us have been giving our opinions on the discussion posts, so I'd like to hear your opinion as well.
Yeah, I have a very formed opinion of this. I actually 5 years ago signed a contract to write a book on this subject. I've yet to actually finish a chapter. I need to make some time, but I will tell you, I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that the military service experience, to include military family experience, uniquely prepares you for success as an entrepreneur. There's a classic academic definition of what entrepreneurship is, and it's the pursuit of opportunity in the face of inherently constrained resources. If you think about that for a second and think about that definition in the context of your experience in the military, that's what you learned how to do. One of the things, as an Air Force guy, one of the things that kills me is to have to admit that some of the most remarkable successes that I've seen from veterans pursuing business ownership, now again over 15 years of doing this, come from young enlisted Marines. Kills me to have to admit that, but I think it's a proof point for what I just described. If you think about the experience of a young enlisted Marine, the pursuit of opportunity in the face of inherently constrained resources. Was your experience in the military that your commander, your section chief, your squadron commander, or your whatever, came up to you and said, "Hey, got a really important mission, Alan, that we need you to take on. And guess what? If you need more people, I'm going to give you more people, and you need more money and resources, I'll give you whatever you need. And by the way, take your time, just get this done." Guess what? It was always exactly the opposite of that. It was really important mission, going to make the difference between success or failure. And guess what? Can't give you any more people, can't give you any more resources. You got to figure out a way to get it done. And guess what? It has to be done next week. You learned how to do that in the military. That is at its core what entrepreneurship is about. And I think that experience, and the data bears it out too. If you look at, so military veterans are over-indexed, there's an academic term, to entrepreneurship. Military veterans only represent, 5-6% of the US population, but at least the last time I looked at the data, almost 14-15% of all small business owners in this country are veterans. And it's a historical trend. If you look back to World War II, if I remember the data, within 7 years of the end of World War II, almost 50% of the 12 million veterans that came back from World War II had launched a small business in this country. That's pretty remarkable. On top of that, 5-year success rate of businesses launched by military veterans significantly and statistically significantly higher than non-veterans. 5 years is like the magic number. If you can build a business that lasts 5 years, you're likely to make it to 20. But the reality is, 60% of the businesses that are launched in this country never make it to 5 years. But again, veterans significantly more likely to make it to 5 years than non-veterans. I think the other piece of this is you become, what's the right word? Your military experience also taught you, more so than people who have not served in the military, to accept and learn and then move on from failure. You will experience a million intermittent failures in the context of, and I'm talking about things like, not catastrophic failures. I'm talking about things like someone telling you no. Do you know how many times I've been told no in the context of, in my case, building the Institute for Veterans and Military Families? I thought this would be an easy thing, right? Let's start an institute, run programs, help veterans. I was an acquisition guy in the Air Force. I figured I'd go to, all those companies that I awarded hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts to while I was in the military, the Boeings and the Lockheeds, and I would say, help me fund this thing, help me get this thing off the ground. It was 3 years before any of those folks even would take a meeting with me. And I easily could have just said, okay, well, I'll do something else. And I think a lot of people that didn't have that experience of military service, that taught you how to be resilient, taught you how to not take no for an answer, probably would have quit. So, I think there are several really important attributes of your military service experience that correlate directly to your ability to launch and persist in business ownership.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to quote someone in the chat. It was Eric. He said he is under the impression that in order to be successful in his business, he has to do it better, no matter how many others have done it before him. He has to cultivate his own brand and is unique to his vision and focus. So I just thought that was a really good comment to make.
Well, so you can't just tee that up though, Deanna, and then not let me react to it.
Go ahead.
Because there's all kinds of good things in there that I think are worth talking about for a second. First is the word success. So let's talk about that for a second. What the heck does that mean? I think it's real. I almost take this as one of my personal soapboxes, this idea of success, because to me, what is powerful about business ownership is that it confers to you and you alone the autonomy to define what success is. The idea that, the assumption that success is this big scalable business where you're generating tons of revenue and you have all these employees, maybe that's somebody's success. It doesn't have to be your success. I'll tell you, when I'm done all this, I'm a big fly fisherman, and I'm going to move out to Montana, and I'm going to open up a little shop out there where I, have rocking chairs on the porch and talk to other old guys about fishing and sell some fishing equipment. And my definition of success is not going to be about how much I sell in a week or how many customers come through my front door. And that, that for all of you is something to really think hard about. What, the autonomy that you get as a consequence of being an entrepreneur means that you get to decide for yourself. Nobody else does what success means, what success looks like. So I think that's something, and it's nothing I can teach either. But it is a conversation that you have with yourself, you have with your family, and what do you want to achieve here? I think that's a really important foundational conversation that you have with yourself, not just when you start a business, but over time. There's a great example. It's not a great example, actually. It's a good example to make my point. It's a horrible story of one of you, a young woman a few years back who went through one of our entrepreneurship training programs, and she had a wonderful little business. She was a big, loved animals, started a business in the pet industry, making some she made these highly designed collars for dogs and cats. They were leather, they were beautiful, they were very artisan, if you will. And she got the call that every entrepreneur thinks they dream of. She got the call from Walmart, and Walmart was interested in putting her product on their shelf. And she got very excited, and but over her conversations with Walmart, you know, remember how Walmart competes. And by the way, I love Walmart. Walmart's a big supporter of ours. So I want to say that right up front. But Walmart competes on price, right? Their deal with their customer is that when you come into that store, you're going to get the best price possible. And Walmart is going to make sure that you do. Well, how that translates sometimes to small business owners is that, and in this case, you know, Walmart went to this young entrepreneur and said, listen, we want to put your product on the shelf, but it's too expensive. We need you to re-engineer it. We need you to redesign it so that you can bring it down to a certain price point. And she was so excited about the opportunity to sell in a Walmart store, maybe became a little blinded to what really mattered for her in the context of this business. And she did exactly what Walmart asked. She re-engineered her product. It went from being made from leather to an imitation leather. It went from being hand sewn, you know, to manufactured sort of for in a mass production kind of way. And you know, she got that contract, and you know, the product ended up on the shelves of Walmart. What do you think happened though? Guess what? It didn't. We can't. In a classroom, I could say raise your hand, but it didn't sell because everything that was special about it got engineered out. And her about 3 months later, her business shut down. You know, so this idea of, you know, asking yourself the question, what does success look like? It's not something you ask just once. You know, it's something that you constantly return to and revisit, because there will be opportunities and situations where you will be seduced away from the core reason that you started your business in the first place. You know, it's the shiny object. It's the opportunity out there that, you know, somebody dangles in front of you that in the moment seems very, very attractive, but play it out. And I don't mean play it out in practice, play it out in your head. Where's this going to go? And is this going to take me to a place where everything that was important and special about why I started doing this in the first place is marginalized and washed away? You know, so I think, you know, I know it wasn't a question, Deanna, but you know, that idea of somebody saying, you know, to be successful, I need to. Well, what the heck does that mean? You know, I think that's part of the question that everybody's got to answer for themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for commenting on that as well. I just thought it was important to note, so I'm glad I did pull that out. So kind of still talking about, you know, you had mentioned a little earlier, Mike, about, you know, being like, what value do you offer? We have a lot of businesses that are still in that ideation phase, a good amount. Tiffany has a question more so on that. As you're looking at your idea for your business, how do you know what will work when there are other businesses that offer the same service?
Well, first off, so it's a great question. And first off, back to an earlier point I made, your goal should be, while you might be solving the same problem, you should work to not offer the same service. If you know if you get the distinction that I'm working towards here. You know, it's back to this idea of differentiation. You know, I like to think about what entrepreneurs do as solving problems for people, and opportunity exists at that nexus or that intersection of problems and solutions. But that means that, you know, to answer your question, Tiffany, you have to start by really examining the problem that you're solving for people. Don't focus on what you do yet. Start focusing on really understanding the problem. Then go to looking at your competitors. So how do other people solve this same problem? That, you know, and you know, from there, the question becomes, how can I solve this problem differently? Or how can I solve this problem more, maybe the better way to put it is more completely for a customer than what the standard is in the particular industry I'm competing for. Because, when I talk about this, if you think about, there's a very fundamental, and I want to make sure I'm not covering ground. Did you give these guys any homework did they watch any video?
They should have, if they kept to the schedule, they should have all watched.
Well, I don't want to be repeating something that they may have already watched, but I will tell you, and it's not, at first you might not see this as core to the conversation, but I want to pose something to you. One of the most fundamental missteps that business owners take, particularly early on, is understanding how to price a product. How do you price a product? There's only one way to price a product, one. And it has nothing to do with how much it costs you to make it. It has nothing to do with how much it costs you to deliver it. The only way to price a product is what the market will bear. Because if you price it any other way than what the consumer is willing to pay, you're doing one of two things. You're either leaving money on the table, meaning that you're pricing your product at a price point that is not commensurate with the value that you're creating for the customer, meaning they would have been willing to pay more, or you're doing just the opposite, and you won't sell anything because you're pricing your product above and beyond the value that the consumer perceives. Now that might sound very academic. Let's make it not academic. Think about yourself as a consumer. You go into a store, stick with Walmart, you go into Walmart and think about what you do. You pick something off the shelf. What's the very first thing you do when you pick it up? Everybody does the same thing. Everybody. You look at the price. And then what happens in your head? In your head, you say to yourself, this thing's $10.99. Is it worth it? Right? That's what you do as a consumer. Well, is it worth it relative to what? Is it worth it relative to the other options that I have to address the need that motivated me to pick up this thing in the first place? That's how you work as a consumer. You need to turn that around and apply the same logic to how you think about your business. Meaning that when you think about how you price a product, you should price the product as close to the consumer's perception of value as you can, because that's how you're going to maximize the revenue that you're going to generate. But how does that go back to the Tiffany's core question? It means everything to Tiffany. It is the answer to Tiffany's core question, because her goal should be starting with, what's the problem that my product or service is positioned to solve for people? I need to dig in and really understand that problem. And how can I then, with that understanding, create a product or service offering that, as completely as possible, and more so than my competitors, solves that problem? Because if you do that, guess what you just earned for yourself? You just earned for yourself the opportunity to be Starbucks, to charge a premium price above and beyond what your competitors charge. I noticed in the chat, it's hard for me to talk, and every once in a while my eyes drift over that chat. Somebody wrote something, consumer will pay for quality. You're right, they will pay for quality. That's an example of what I just described, right? If quality is one measure of this idea of solving a problem completely, but here's the thing: you have to know consumer will pay for quality when quality matters, right? The only way you know if quality matters is if you really dig into the, just this weekend, the little light came on in my truck that I was out of wiper fluid, and I went to the auto parts store on my way home, and I walked in, and there were two displays of wiper fluid in the auto parts store. It was the blue stuff for $3.99 a jug, and then next to it they had this fancy orange looking wiper fluid stuff but it was $10 a jug. What do you think I bought? I bought the blue $3.99 stuff because I've never encountered, even living in Syracuse, New York, a situation where the blue $3.99 stuff didn't work, right? So that orange stuff may have been of much higher quality, and it may have a lower a lower freezing point, and it may do all kinds of wonderful stuff. But in this case, quality doesn't matter. I need the minimum acceptable solution to solve my problem. But then there's all kinds of other situations where it matters a ton. But the point is, you have to understand the problem first that you're solving in order to craft the solution that better solves that problem relative to what your competitors are putting on the table. Tiffany, I don't know if that answers your question, but there's my shot at it.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Kristen. Kristen, go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question.
Thanks, Deanna. So I am the tax person. That's me, Dr. Haynie.
Yeah.
And one of the, you've said a couple of things that kind of touch on my question already, but one of the things I feel as though I have a strong sense of the thing that differentiates me from all of the free DIY or even cheap options, right? Cheaper options.
Yeah.
But what I hear from a lot of people, like when I talk to other folks, mentors and whatnot, I get conflicting advice on where to go next with my focus when I'm trying to grow, right? Like I'm ready to take that next step. And some people tell me I need to focus on my sales, right? To bring in the clients. Other people tell me to focus on more marketing stuff. And I know that there's a link between the two, right? But my question is for you, when I'm focusing on trying to differentiate myself, do I do that more in sales calls and getting on the phone with people, or do I do that more in my marketing? If I'm gonna invest, say, because being in taxes, I have, January to April is kind of my busy season. So right now I have the time to invest in some of my own personal development type stuff, right? So if I'm going to invest in something, what would you advise on that?
Well, let me ask one question first. So for you, what does growth mean? Does it mean more clients? Does it mean more revenue from existing clients? What does that mean?
So for me, it means more clients. I want to focus on more of a certain type of client.
Okay. So the marketing, as you pointed out, marketing and sales inherently connected. It's a very circular relationship, because the extent to which you via marketing build a brand, et cetera, that is by design meant to open the door and connect you to clients that resonate with that brand. So in the context of a differentiation strategy, that the brand that you build is going to essentially drive who you're selling to. And, so without, again, a ton of detail about your business, the market that you're in, et cetera, I would first focus my efforts on establishing and growing your brand and your reputation in the market that you're trying to sell to, because in part that will open doors that you don't even know are out there. So the extent to which sort of direct selling is going to create opportunity for you. It's going to be a 5% hit rate, right? Whereas somebody who's coming to you versus you going to them is a much higher potential client with regard to the likelihood that you're going to close a relationship. So my 2 cents is, I would start on the marketing side, given that you're already established, you already have clients. I would try to extend your brand in your market, be very careful when you do it, meaning that if you had said that you want to attract a certain type of client, you have to go out and produce marketing, if you will, marketing output that is very much targeted and focused on that particular segment of the market. Whatever segment of the market you're trying to capture, your brand has to resonate with that segment and that segment very specifically. But what you're more likely to generate sales leads as a consequence of that marketing that have a higher potential for you to close the deal, if you will, that as opposed to buying lists and doing direct sales calls and all that kind of stuff. So it's my 2 cents. If it doesn't work, you can't blame me, though. If it doesn't work, you can't blame me.
Not your fault. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So Dr. Haynie, Spencer had a question in the chat, and you kind of talked about it a little bit when we talked about, service companies differentiating themselves, but I didn't want to miss, what he put in. So his question was, how have service companies you've seen differentiated themselves? And you did answer that a little bit. His comment was, I have started my HVAC company that I would love to differentiate from the big dogs in the industry, but I am not sure how changing out a furnace can be vastly different when the end product is largely the same.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. If you were up here in upstate New York, just showing up is enough to differentiate you. Again, without a ton of deep knowledge about the business, the industry, my gut reaction to that is it's all about has nothing to do with putting in the HVAC, has everything to do with how you serve the customer, how easy you make it for them, the extent to which, I had I'm embarrassed to tell you, I had a little plumbing problem not too long ago that required somebody to come out and blow out the main sewer line of my house. It was a mess. But I will tell you, I will hire, and there were 10 pages in the virtual yellow pages, if you will, of folks who plumbing companies who do this. I will only ever again hire the company that I hired to do that kind of work. It has nothing to do with what they did. It has everything to do with how they treated me throughout the process. They showed up when they said they were going to show up. When they arrived, polite, worried about my house and not making a mess. When they finished, they walked me through everything they did, explained to me what the problem was. Then they called me 2 hours later. Somebody from the company called me to ask me if I was satisfied with the people that came out to my house. The whole experience could not have been better. And I will never hire anybody else to do that work than that particular company. And it has nothing to do with the actual thing they did. It has nothing to do, they solved the problem. In your case, they installed the furnace, but they differentiated themselves as a function of the way they treated me. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. There you are, Spencer. I see you up there in the corner.
Thank you so much. In the chat, we also had another kind of question slash comment when we're talking about primary value added to your business. Alan said he is feeling that he has a simple business plan. He is he's starting a martial arts school with a focus on highly functioning disabled adults and children. He teaches swordsmanship as well, not as easy to find in that discipline. So it's, when he was saying that, his question after was that uniqueness may be his primary value add. Was just trying to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, one, like I said, you've heard me say a couple times, I've been doing this for a long time, I've never come across a swordsmanship business. So that already is a first. But I will tell you, you had me at disability. I think that's your, so if you think about, we toss around this term niche market all the time, right? A niche means a specialized market. Doesn't mean it has to be small. If you think about communities in this country that are underserved, the people with disabilities are one of those communities, vastly underserved. There was one of the things, I've been using this example for a while, but a few years back, there was an article that I read in the New York Times. I read newspapers to find ideas, because I think one of the things, if you forget all the political reporting, but the other stuff that's in it, if you look at lifestyle trends in this country, reporting on changes in demographics, et cetera, that you find the Washington Post, New York Times, if they're talking about those issues, that means there's a whole host of problems that likely affect those populations. And a few years back, there was an article about 20-somethings in this country and how they vacation. And the article talked about the fact that young people today, they don't go on vacations like my parents, would go to the beach for a week or whatever. They like to climb mountains and jump out of airplanes and do all these extreme kinds of experiences. And for me, I instantly went to, well, what about 20-somethings with disabilities? I bet you they would like to do those things too. What about a business focused specifically on adventure vacations for people with disabilities? I spent 2 hours on the internet trying to find it. It doesn't exist. I don't think to this day, and I just don't have time. So if anybody wants to take that business idea and run with it, go. But the point is, when I hear an example like you described, I think the disability piece is actually what's most differentiating about it. It's a highly underserved market, and the extent to which, again, you craft a value proposition that isn't like doing it for everybody else, but is uniquely solving a problem for that community, meeting them where they are, as my friend Maureen Casey likes to say, who I think is on this Zoom as well. You meet them where they are and solve a problem for them that is unique to them. That in and of itself is a highly differentiated offering.
Thank you. So moving on to James B. He had a question in the chat. He can't verbally respond, but I'll be monitoring the chat if he has any responses. His initial question was wondering if you could speak to strategy as it relates to business. He seeks to launch a counseling online business, and strategy is elusive, at least for now.
So when I hear that term strategy, I first, I'm gonna sound a little repetitive because I'm gonna go back to something that I described earlier. It starts with competitive strategy. How is it that you intend to compete? Are you going to do the same thing that everybody else is doing, or are you going to solve the problem in a different way and therefore compete based on a differentiated competitive strategy? A lot of the answers to that question are going to come as a function of really understanding the industry that you're about to enter. It's never been easier to do industry and market research. Industry, and just to be so we're clear on terms, when I use the term industry, I'm talking about your competitors. When I use the term market, I'm talking to the people you're selling to. They're two different things. The market are your customers. The industry that you're competing in are all the other firms solving the problem that you're trying to solve for customers. So for me, if I were contemplating the business you described, the first thing I would do is spend time understanding the industry that I'm going to compete in. What are my customers doing? I hear when I teach 18-year-olds business ownership, you talk to them, every other one wants to start a bar, gym, restaurant, or coffee shop. It's always one of those things. But then you ask them, have you ever worked in a bar or a gym or a restaurant or a coffee shop? And they say, nope. And I say, well, guess what? Before you start this business, go work in one of those places for 6 months. Go work in a coffee shop for 6 months. It's a similar, it's a similar piece of advice that I would give to you as you're working on formulating a competitive strategy. Not necessarily go work, for a competitor for 6 months, though that's not a bad idea either. But really understand how it is they compete. Start with that as your baseline. And then look for opportunities to compete differently, compete better as a consequence of what you understand from doing that analysis. I will tell you, the internet is a remarkable tool for this, and not just as a function of sort of passively reading, but actively engaging. There is a community. There is an online community for almost everything you could imagine. Infiltrate them. Execute a counterinsurgency. If your product is, you're trying to sell. Again, real example from a bunch of years back. You're trying to sell a product, for new mothers, and you're not a new mother. Guess what? Find the Reddit thread for, where new mothers are getting together, talking about all their problems, and hop on there and post your idea. You don't have to frame it as your idea, but you frame it as, hey, by the way, have any of you experienced this problem? It's really hard, bothering me. And next thing you know, you will have pages and pages and pages of free primary market research, because they will open up. Oh, I'm having this problem too. Oh, I hate it when this happens. Oh, and then maybe your next post is, well, don't you wish there was a product that did this to solve? Oh, that, it's remarkable what you can get if you're just creative. Don't just read reports. Don't just spend your time, doing sort of that secondary research. Actually go out and talk to people. And the beautiful thing about the internet is you don't have to physically talk to people. You can use use these communities, these online blogs and threads, and use them as ways to to talk directly to customers or competitors to understand what they're doing.
Thank you, Mike. And James had kind of another question to kind of add on. Really kind of, it's a pretty detailed thing. I could answer, for instance, let me ask the question first, and then I'll just caveat with this is what this course is focusing on. But he's wondering, what would you consider are the biggest core elements to a business proposal? And I would just caveat that to say, look at your schedule for the 7 weeks, and really those 5 big topics in the middle that start next week and end on week 6 are really those 5 big things you should have in a business proposal. But also get Dr. Haynie's opinion.
Well, yeah. So I won't give you an academic answer. I'll cut right to it. Convince me that people care. It's not a section. It's not. Convince me that people care, because if you can't convince me that what the problem you're solving matters, and 2, that the solution that you've developed is compelling, I don't need to read the rest of your proposal. I don't need to read the rest of your plan. If you can't get me there, because almost anything else we can solve together, right? But if you are coming to me with ultimately a fundamentally flawed business idea, and the only fundamental flaw is one where you're proposing to solve a problem that people don't care about, or a solution that doesn't actually completely solve the problem, everything else can be fixed. But you can't fix those 2 things. Because think about how important it is right from the get-go. Because if you take action to execute on what is otherwise a fundamentally flawed business concept, you will constantly be fighting against yourself. You'll constantly be working and spending money and time and energy to compensate for the fact that at its core, you're not creating value for the consumer that they're willing to pay for. So it's it starts with just convince me that I should care. How's that?
Great. We got the non-academic and the academic version. So I really appreciate you expounding on that. We're moving to a question from Lola Robinson. Lola, I'll go ahead and ask the first question. And then if you want to ask your second question live, that would be great, your follow-up. So Dr. Haynie, we're kind of going to talk about a little bit of this, horrible plague or pandemic that's out there right now, COVID. So, and really, Lola has a question formed around that. She's seeking to price her product at a premium price point, basically the luxury industry. The unforeseen circumstances of this pandemic has caused her to have to revise her business model. So she's wondering if she should wait to launch her product kind of post-COVID, or launch it anyway and focus more on how to market it and who to market it to.
Great. Yeah, so I was hoping we were going to get through, what you all don't know is since March, I've been the leader at Syracuse University, responsible for the university's response to COVID. So literally COVID has been in my life 24 hours a day, for the past 7 months. So I was hoping I was going to get through this without having to talk about COVID. But, COVID's going to change a lot of things. A lot of what I'll tell you, what we're experiencing right now, is going to stick. Even after there's a vaccine, even at, everything from the way people engage. There's a lot about this technology stuff, Zooms, et cetera, that we all don't like. But guess what? There's also been a ton of people introduced to this that otherwise wouldn't have naturally found it, that are going to want to continue to engage this way. That's one example of when I say I think things are going to stick. I certainly believe that it would be foolish not to think through the implications, long-term, short-term and long-term of how COVID may change, sort of how we interact and engage and, buying patterns and all that kind of stuff. That said, and again, it's going to sound like a cop-out, but I go right back to something I already said. The extent to which you pivot is a function of, is the solution that you're offering any less compelling today than it was before COVID? If the answer to that question is no, I wouldn't change anything. That might have implications for, your own personal situation may change. That might be such that you have to delay or for reasons, but it doesn't necessarily, if the value proposition that you're proposing to bring to market is as strong today as it was, before COVID, I wouldn't necessarily change a thing. That said, if that's not true, then it would be foolish to launch in the face of that knowledge, and the work that you should do is, how do I pivot, even if it's just pivoting at the margins, even if it's just changing elements of the products offering, service offering, whatever it is, so that it's more aligned with the needs that the consumer has now that may have changed as a consequence of COVID. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but for me, I like to think about these things in simple terms, and it doesn't get any more simpler than, what's the problem I'm solving, and is my solution compelling? And if that relationship holds true, then there's very little in the external environment that would suggest that you don't go to market.
Lola, go ahead. You can ask your follow-up.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. So my follow-up question to that is, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea to, during your startup phase, to get angel investors involved or conducting like seed funding for your startup company? Is that a good thing or bad thing, especially now with COVID and everything's going on? The economy, the resources are limited. So I actually was trying to seek maybe looking into getting angel investors involved at the beginning phase. And I don't know if I should just
Okay,
you
tipped your hand to me, so now I know I'm going to upset you with my answer. Yeah, so tortoise and the hare. I would rather you be a tortoise than the hare. Now let me explain what that means. It may take you a little longer, but if it is at all possible that you can get this thing off the ground without bringing in other people and other people's money, I recommend that you try to figure out how to do that. Because you, when you do that, and in some cases it makes sense, but understand that angel investors are investors for a reason. They're investors because they expect a return on their investment. And as a consequence of that, it's not very often that they are content to sit passively on the sideline and not want to take some role in making decisions for you or with you related to your business. And it doesn't always turn out well. You know, my data's a little old, but you know, about 2 years ago, there was a study of new businesses that took external funding. Now they were talking about venture capitalists, not angel investors. There's a difference, but you know, it looked at companies less than 7 years that took venture capital funding, and upwards of 60% of them within 2 years of taking venture capital funding, the founding CEO had been forced out. The founding entrepreneur had been forced out of the company. You know, so something I said earlier, what I find really compelling about the journey that you all are either taking or about to take is the freedom that it buys you, the autonomy that, you know, and as soon as you bring somebody else and somebody else's money into the mix, you're giving some of that away. Just understand that going in.
Thank you very much. So I think since we're on the topic of funding, and I did want to get to this topic and we only have a few minutes left, although I know some of you still posted questions. So just to caveat this, we'll make sure that those get answered. If we don't cover them tonight, I'll copy them all. We'll get them answered. We'll post them in Blackboard. But kind of just to close with this, Dr. Haynie, could you expand a little bit more on kind of the idea of bootstrapping, how it can be beneficial to someone starting out a business?
Well, I mean, sure. And, you know, the number one benefit is so bootstrapping is a term that is used to describe launching and growing a business within, acting within the resources that you have under your control. So not just it's not just your money, you know, there's lots of, you know, bootstrapping is, you know, that term is extended to a strategy of venture creation and growth that essentially involves not taking other people's. This is why I described it as the tortoise and the hare. It takes a little longer, but you know, it really is about being creative and entrepreneurial to advance your business goals within the means you have at your disposal. And again, means, I'm not talking just about money, but I'm talking about, you know, so I'll give you some things and some examples of bootstrapping strategies in practice. So where's Kristen, our tax person here? Guess what? How many of you other small business owners need to get your taxes done every year, right? Well, a good example of a bootstrapping strategy, and I bet you Kristen needs some services that some of you may provide, right? So you know, an example again I use all the time out in Denver, Colorado. There are two veteran business owners that went through one of our programs. One has a big landscaping business. The other one is an accountant. No kidding, a lawyer and an accountant. But and they trade services. The landscaping business takes care. You know, this lawyer accountant has a storefront, has an old house that he operates his business out of. The landscaping business does the landscaping all year, and every year the lawyer / accountant does the taxes for the landscaping business. That's an example of a bootstrapping strategy. Hey, one of you owns a restaurant and one of you owns a bakery. What happens to the kitchen at the restaurant when the restaurant is closed? Nothing, right? Restaurant's closed, nothing's going on. Hey, that bakery though, they have to open up the next morning with fresh baked goods, blah blah blah. How about a trade? You know, so instead of that bakery opening up its own storefront and making that big capital investment in all of this, you know, to set up this kitchen, et cetera, work out a deal with the restaurant where when they close, the bake staff comes in, works overnight, does all the baking, et cetera, and they're generating some revenue. They're paying the restaurant, so the restaurant is generating a return on the big investment they made and all that in that big fancy kitchen that they otherwise wouldn't have generated. Another bootstrapping example from real veterans that went through. You know, we have a veteran who went through this program years back that started a business, novel business, but he identified the need for custom crate building, you know, to ship furniture, to ship art and all that kind of stuff. So custom crating, but he had very little capital to get this thing off the ground, but he was driving behind, back to our friend at Walmart, driving behind a Walmart one day, and he noticed this huge pile of shipping pallets that were just there. They were trash, right? And he had the idea he could literally get his raw materials for this custom crate business free by recycling pallets. And guess what? He solved the problem for the Walmart too, because the Walmart has to pay to discard all those pallets. So bootstrapping strategy. He now drives around town and has a regular route picking up discarded shipping pallets back to his shop. They break them down to the raw materials and they use the wood from the shipping pallet to build their custom crates to ship their product. He cut his raw material costs almost to nothing as a consequence. Those are all examples of so bootstrapping is not simply just using your money. It is just using your money and being entrepreneurial and creative as a strategy to reduce your expenses at the same time. Because you can't the core of a bootstrapping strategy is a relentless focus on your costs. What can I do to still deliver a high value product or service, but do it at as reduced a cost as I possibly can? Get free stuff. By the way, colleges and universities, great place to get free stuff. If you live near a college or university, even a community college, guess what? The way we teach today is all experiential. So every business school in the country, every single year, has groups of students looking to do projects for real business owners. Marketing plan, industry analysis. Go make a relationship at those colleges. Find that business school. Say, hey, I'm trying to get a business off the ground, and it would be wonderful if next semester a group of your students would take me on as a client and help me build a marketing plan for my business. They're smart, they're creative. So all of that are examples of what a bootstrapping strategy is. How'd I do, Deanna?
You did great, Mike. Thank you. You always do fine. Well, I just want to say thank you very much. I did keep track of, there were a couple of questions. We'll make sure we get to those. We'll get those posted in Blackboard, those answers. Obviously, I'm available at any time. And you all have my email. But again, Dr. Haynie, thank you so much for joining us. Misty, thank you for joining us and staying with us. And she did get mentioned tonight, so I will say thank you to Maureen for joining us as well. Dr. Haynie, the value that you add to these sessions it goes so far with this class, and thank you so much for your insights and sharing a little bit of your heart with us to kind of close us out tonight. I really appreciate it. Do you have any final words to say?
Nope, just thank you. Like I said, I wasn't kidding when I said this was the best thing I did all day, because the rest of my day was pretty miserable. So thank you for the opportunity very much.
All right, well, just stay with me just for a second. I'm going to take a quick picture just so we can post that and kick off. So everybody just wave and smile. All right, there we go. Beautiful. So thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week. We're going to have Sean Brannigan joining us. The link and all the information about him will be posted in Blackboard. Some of that is in there, and this recording will also be posted. Don't forget to turn your homework in. It is due by Sunday. Thank you so much, everyone. And
thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.